Right now, somewhere, a person is lying on a table while a stranger pushes a clear liquid into a vein, asks them to count backward from 10, and deletes them. Not to sleep, not under, gone. For the next 4 hours, that person will have a tube down their throat, a scalpel in their abdomen, and a heart rate the monitor describes as bored. The remarkable part is not that this works. The remarkable part is that the person doing it cannot fully tell you how. It happens more than 100 million times a year. We are very good at it. We are also, on a deep and slightly embarrassing level, guessing, and the only people who know that are the ones holding the syringe. The whole thing started as a magic trick on October 16th, 1846, in a cramped amphitheater in Boston, now called the Ether Dome. A dentist named William Morton soaked a sponge in ether, held it under a patient's nose, and a surgeon cut a tumor out of the man's neck while the man said nothing. The room was full of doctors who had come, frankly, to watch him fail. He did not fail. To understand what those doctors had been doing up to that morning, meet Robert Liston, the most celebrated surgeon in London a few years earlier. Liston's signature move was to turn to the gallery, say, "Time me, gentlemen," and amputate a leg in under 30 seconds. His record was 28. This was not showmanship. The patient was awake, held down by orderlies, and every extra second was another second of a man screaming and sliding toward death by shock. Speed was mercy. Liston was so committed to it that on one famous occasion, he amputated a leg in 2.5 minutes, and in the blur, also took off his assistant's fingers and slashed a spectator's coat. The patient and the assistant both later died of infection, and the spectator reportedly dropped dead of fright on the spot. It is the only operation in history with a 300% mortality rate. That was the state of the art. The job was not perform surgery, the job was finish before the patient does. Ether ended that overnight, and not because it dulled pain, because an unconscious body does not go into shock from being cut, so people stopped dying of the operation itself. Surgery became something a person could survive, and nobody in that room knew why it worked. They knew that it worked the way you know a light switch works. You flip it, the room changes, you do not interrogate the wall. Ether went into operating theaters across the planet on the strength of one demonstration and zero explanation. For the next century, and if we are honest, straight through to today, the medical position on how anesthesia switches off a human being has been, more or less, a confident shrug performed in a nicer coat. General anesthesia is not sleep. Sleep is something a brain does. It cycles, it dreams, it half listens for the smoke alarm, and a loud enough noise drags a sleeper back. Anesthesia is something done to a brain, and a loud enough noise does nothing because there is no one home to hear it. It is also not one thing. It is three different jobs bundled under one word and one bill. The drug has to switch off awareness, so the person is not there. It has to switch off memory, so that if some thin part of them flickers, none of it gets saved. And it has to switch off movement, so they hold still while someone operates on the part of them that very much wants to move. Three separate dials, none of them perfectly linked to the others. An anesthetist spends the whole operation at what is essentially a mixing board, riding three faders at once, keeping a human being for hours in a narrow band between awake and permanently, guided mostly by blood pressure, heart rate, and the concentration of gas in an exhaled breath. We named the entire procedure after the smallest of its mercies, anesthesia, coined in 1846 from the Greek for without sensation, which is a bit like naming a controlled demolition after the dust. So, how does a molecule talk a brain into vacating the premises? The oldest good answer is over a century old and almost insultingly simple. Around 1899, a German pharmacologist named Hans Meyer, and right after him, a man named Charles Overton, noticed you could predict how strong an anesthetic was from one boring property: how well it dissolves in oil. The greasier the molecule, the better it knocks you out. They worked this out by anesthetizing tadpoles and measuring, which is the most 1899 sentence imaginable. olive oil, and tadpoles. That was the theory of anesthetic action for the better part of a century. The trouble is, it was almost right, which is worse than wrong, because it sent everyone looking in the fat for 50 years. The oil number was a coincidence wearing the costume of a cause. Anesthetics turned out to act mostly on proteins, specific ion channels in the neuron, and the oil solubility just happened to ride along. The thing that should have ended the argument, and mostly just deepened it, is xenon. Xenon is a noble gas. Noble, in chemistry, means it does not bond, does not react, does not participate, the element equivalent of a man at a party who will not take his coat off. It was assumed, for that reason, to do nothing to anything. Have a patient breathe enough of it and they go under, completely, cleanly, one of the best anesthetics there is. A gas whose entire personality is not interacting still reaches into a human skull and turns the lights off by quietly jamming exactly the right receptors, which is the one thing it was supposed to be incapable of. Whatever consciousness is, it can apparently be ended by a substance that spends the rest of its life refusing to touch anything. Those three faders, awareness, memory, movement, do not always move together, and the component that handles hold still is a paralytic, a drug that freezes every muscle a person has, including the ones they would use to wave, to flinch, to form the word stop. So consider the rare case where the paralytic is doing its job and the unconsciousness is not. The patient is paralyzed and present, awake, feeling it, and physically unable to signal a single human in the room. It has a clinical name: accidental awareness under general anesthesia. The largest study of it, a British audit called NAP5, combed through 3 million operations. It put the rate at about 1 in 19,000. Rare. Behind that number are real accounts, and the detail that recurs is not the pain. 42% reported being unable to move. Many reported hearing the surgical team talk over them. The thing that left lasting harm more than pain was the paralysis, lying inside a body that has stopped taking instructions while strangers work. Rare is a beautiful word until you set it against the number of operations performed every year and run the multiplication you would rather not run. And here is the genuinely unsettling turn in what "it worked" can quietly mean. Because the memory fader and the awareness fader are separate, the system sometimes succeeds by erasing the evidence. The patient was there, felt it. The drug just made certain they would never find out. The anesthetic did not always protect them from the experience. It protected them from the memory of the experience. And from the medical point of view, those are the same successful surgery. Step back far enough, and you arrive at the actual embarrassing center of this. Medicine cannot fully explain how anesthesia removes consciousness because medicine cannot explain consciousness. You cannot reverse engineer an off switch when you have never located the thing it turns off. We have superb maps of which brain regions go quiet, how the cortex stops talking to itself, where the drug binds. We have everything except the one sentence that says what is lost when a person goes under, and where it goes, and how it finds its way back. And the unnerving part is that nobody is waiting for that sentence before proceeding. The work continues harder than ever, with no map. In 2020, a team at Scripps argued the trigger is in the fatty membrane around the neuron. The lipids reorganize briefly, and that cascade is what dims the signal, which is the old olive oil hunch reincarnated with better instruments. Out at the fringe, serious people propose that the answer lives down at the quantum level, inside protein scaffolds in the neuron smaller than a virus, which would mean consciousness is hiding in the most submicroscopic crawl space in the known universe, making it either the deepest fact about existence or the single most expensive way ever devised to have a headache. Nobody has closed the case. The people solving this are navigating in the dark on purpose, and they keep arriving on time. So, the deepest fact about anesthesia is the one everyone lives with by not looking at it. Every day, all over the world, Millions of people are walked up to the edge of consciousness and switched off, cleanly, on schedule, using a tool built before anyone understood it, aimed at a thing still nobody can define. We invented a machine that deletes the one part of a person that would object to being deleted. It is the single most routine miracle anyone performs without reading the instructions. And the only reason that does not haunt the people on the table is that the part of them it would haunt is reliably the exact part already switched off.